Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, or evening, whatever time it is when you're viewing this video. It is August 1st and it's also my birthday, so I'm pretty excited to share this video with you. As you know, I've been working through the Art Making Club challenge list that I created. I don't know why I started this at the beginning of the summer when my kids are out of school. It was a little bit unrealistic, but I'm still powering through. I guess my hope was that my daughter was going to be interested and want to do it with me. And she did make her own list that she was going to do, but then she didn't follow through. So I'm trying to follow through and get it done. And the next animal on the list is the barred owl. You can also see that I changed it to Art Making Club Animals Challenge just to take the pressure off a little bit. These are animals that I would like to draw. Some of them I've already drawn. Like I did a project with a sloth, so I counted that, and also a turtle, but I'd love to do an orca. I'd love to do a hippopotamus. I don't know if I've ever drawn a hippopotamus, so that'd be a great challenge. If you want to see more of my challenge list, you can find it on my Patreon page. Just scroll down a little bit further. I'll put the brushes that I'm using in the notes for this video. I also wanted to tell you I'm using an iPad Pro, and what I do is I have it set up in the Sketchboard Pro. There's lots of things like this out there. I like it because it just, before I had the Sketchboard Pro, Apple doesn't really make a case that works well with the iPad Pro for drawing. It has a Magic Keyboard that you can get separately, but it's not very comfortable to draw on. So I needed something where it actually felt like I was drawing on a drawing board, and this does it. I'm not endorsing Sketchboard Pro. I'm not being paid for this. I just like it, so I thought I'd mention it. I'll also be using the Apple Pencil, and I have the newer version. So you can use the older version too. You do have to download Procreate if you would like to draw along with me, and this is an app that you have to purchase, but it's a one-time purchase, and you can put it on other devices. Like I put it on my daughter and my son's iPads, and they can draw on their iPads as well. And the brushes that you'll see me use, I don't like all of Procreate's brushes. There's a couple that I like the Artist Crayon. I kind of like the 6B pencil, so sometimes I might use that. And I'll mention that in my video again, so you don't have to write it down, and I'll also include it in the notes, which brushes I'm using in case you want to check them out. What I recommend doing is just, if you do want to purchase brushes, buying a pack. I like Max Ulichney, I never say his name correctly, and then Lane's brushes. If you just Google Lane's brushes, you'll see some of his. If you like a more fine artist style, I think Lane's brushes is the way to go. If you're looking for a more textural illustration style, then probably Max Ulichney, or you can combine the two like I do. So you really just, with digital brushes, you just have to try them out. If you don't want to make them yourself and you're purchasing other people's because you just like the way they do it, you don't have the knowledge to make a digital brush yourself. Actually, I've been playing around with that, but I don't feel like I'm a master at it yet. So I purchase brushes and then I try them out until I find one that I like. And oftentimes you might just find one brush that you like from the pack, and that's okay because the prices range from like $2 to $20, however much you want to spend for that particular artist that's creating the digital brushes. Alright, so for this video tutorial, I'm doing, like I mentioned, the barred owl, and we'll be working from this reference photo. And I'm gonna try to be a little more loose with this painting, just to experiment with some of my new digital brushes that I have, or newer ones. So come along with me, don't try to be perfectly photorealistic. You'll see I enhance the colors a little more too, to make them more fun and add some more movement, make them a little more inviting. So, all right, come on with me and we'll get started. Grab your iPad if you have it, or just come watch and enjoy. All right, this is the photo that we're going to be working from of a barred owl. And I got this photo from unsplash.com, and unsplash.com is a great resource for you to find photos that you can use because they are royalty free. You can also give credit to the photographer if you'd like. So I just want to let you know that this is by Sonder Quest. Beautiful photo of a barred owl, and that's what we're going to be using for our reference photo. All right, I have the Procreate app open, and this is my gallery. I'm going to click the plus up here and choose 8x10. You can choose whatever size canvas you want. Once you have it here, you can kind of move it around. I'm also going to use a reference. So you turn that on, and then you can choose the photo that you want to use, which is the barred owl image. And you can move it over to the left. And there's another way to do this where you can use a split screen, but this time we're going to use the reference like that, make it a little bit easier. Next, you want to choose your palette, and I actually already chose my color palette because I didn't want you to have to wait for me to do that part because it takes me a little while. So I'm going to enhance the colors a little bit. I'm not going to choose the colors that you see in the photo. I'm going to go a little bit brighter. These are my favorite brushes. These are my go-to. I'm not crazy about the brushes that Procreate has to offer, but if you are going to use the Procreate brushes, I like the 6B and the Gouache and Sassafras, and I actually do use the Artist Crayon and the 6B on occasion. So there's a good brushes that Procreate has to offer, but you really just have to play around with them yourself and figure out what you like. So this one here, Charcoal, I think it is one of the Lane's charcoal brush set that I really like, and it's pretty much my go-to brush for filling in color. Right now I just created a layer and I'm making a color palette that I can easily click on with the color picker. And what you do is, after you have all of your colors here, and I put them on this layer 1, you can actually touch the screen and hold it down, and that will pick that color for you. So what that does is, as you're working, each time you create a new layer, if you want to go back to a color that you used previously, instead of going over to your color palettes, you can just hold down and click on the specific color. It makes it a little bit easier. You can see, then it changed to yellow. And then you can see how it changes to that light brown sienna color. Pretty cool. Alright, so I am going to try out a few greens. Yeah, I like those greens. I just unchecked the color palette, so I have it there, but I'm going to create a new layer. And I like to name my layers just so I can find them easily. That is sketch 1. And so I'm going to choose the 6B pencil just to let you see that it's a much harder line. I do like it. I do use it for some details, but I prefer this brush that I bought by Ulichney. It's a waxy pencil. It just feels really good when it's going across the iPad screen, and I like that it's a little bit lighter and softer. So for my sketch, I'm going to use the waxy pencil. Ulichney, I don't think I'm saying his name correctly, but he makes some really great brushes for Procreate if you're looking to try some to buy, to try out. So now I'm just working through the shapes that I see, laying it out. You don't have to be perfect. I'll use sometimes the sighting and measuring to see, how many heads in length is the owl, just so I know, but I'm not trying to make a photorealistic owl drawing illustration. I'm trying to be a little more expressive, and this is just how I basically lay out my composition, figure out what I want to include, what I don't include. putting that stick in right in front of the owl. And that's one of the things I love about Procreate is the pinch the screen and zoom in a little bit when you want to add details. I actually learned how to draw digitally with Procreate, and I've never had a Cintiq, but I did get an iPad Pro maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and then a friend of mine told me about Procreate, so I bought it and then struggled with it for a long time, but I think I finally figured out how I want to use it, what I want to use it for, and my workflow. It always changes. I'm always researching, experimenting. I think as a good illustrator, you want to be doing that. You always want to be trying out new things. But right now, I think I've got a pretty good way of using it. And so in this drawing, I'm just going to show you basically how I layer. Now you saw that I lowered the opacity on my lines so they're not quite so dark. And then I created a new layer and I'm adding more detailed sketches. So every time you add something, it helps if you could just put it on a new layer, because that way if you don't like what you did, all you do is delete it or undo it. You know, that's what's so great about Procreate, is that you can move things around, you can shift the shapes. You don't have to stick with this one drawing. Well, that's what's great about digital drawing in general. But so now I'm just going to refine the lines a little more, give them a little more movement. I've been trying to not make my lines so static. Have them more movement. I've done a couple of live animal drawings, and I think that really helps because you have to have a quick movement of the animal. You have to draw quickly, right? So it kind of forces you to just capture what you see in the moment. When you have a photograph, you might think about it too much and try to make everything so perfect. But if you're drawing something from life, sometimes I'll draw my cats. My cat's sitting here sleeping right now, but that makes it a little bit easier to draw, but they're good models. So this will be the first base color for the owl. I thought this light kind of beigey color would be a good base for the barred owl. And there's a couple ways to do this. If you have a smooth brush, you can circle the whole shape and fill it, just like you do in Photoshop. That works too. I like to pretend like I'm painting on a piece of paper and actually fill it in that way, because then you might have some areas where it didn't fill. Your outside line's not so perfect. So that's really my go-to way of working. I don't always use the color fill unless I'm in a hurry on something. Alright, I made a new color palette because I thought it probably would make more sense if I make it as I go, which is typically how I work, because I might create a color palette of the colors I think I want to use, but then I may actually only use 6 or 7 colors. And you see in the color palette, you have a large range of colors that you can use. And if you can narrow it down, you'll have a more cohesive palette. That's something I'm continually trying to work on. I actually just got to meet John Klassen. If you're familiar with his work, he did the "This is not my hat, I want my hat back." He is a master of only doing black and white and then maybe like 2 colors. And I'm always in awe of his work because I just am amazed that he could do that. Just use just a few colors, and that's his signature style. And so if you can figure out a way to have a signature style, something recognizable like that, then people will know it's your work. I think Procreate helps me with that too, because I only use a handful of digital brushes, and I tend to choose the same colors in my color palette. And also when you're working on a book, like a picture book, you want to have a consistent color palette throughout. And Procreate can help you do that too. I feel like this is a commercial for Procreate. I am not being endorsed. This is not an endorsement for Procreate. I just really like it. But you can keep a consistent color palette throughout the book because you have it right there. You have the number of the color. And I didn't mention this, but I'm working in RGB because this is just for social media, my enjoyment. It's not going to be printed. If you're going to print, you want to use CMYK, but you have more of a color variety with RGB, so I prefer to use RGB when I can. And now I'm just taking a look at the leaves in the background because I felt like I needed something, so I'm giving it a little bit of foliage in the background, and I'm using that chunk hole brush. Trying to keep it soft. I'm going for like softer, looser brush strokes for this one. Now just looking at the placement of the leaves, what I want to include, what I'm going to leave out. I don't want to have like a strange shape around his head, so but I do want it to stand out, so I'm just thinking about all these things while I'm working on the illustration. And I do like to name my layers. I don't always. You'll see as I start to get into it, I start to work faster and I don't name the layers, but in the beginning especially I name the layers because if I want to save this as a PSD file and then put it in Photoshop, it's much more frustrating to try and find the layers if I want to change something if they're not named. So if I remember as I'm working, I do try to name the layers to make it a little bit easier for me later on. Trying to have a little bit of variety in the light green and the dark green. Okay, now I'm going to add some texture to the owl. And so, of course, I will name my layer. And then I'm going to, let's see. First, I'll take down the opacity a little bit there. Okay. I created a clipping mask so that it stays just on the base color that I drew. So now because I created a clipping mask, it's not going to go outside of that beigey colored area. And I'm just adding some of the details that I see on the barred owl, not trying to be so perfect or exact, but following the direction of the feathers. Again, keeping it loose. I'm now noticing that I need to fix the shape of his head on the left side. So I just use the color picker to get that lighter color quickly and go to the layer where the base of the owl is, and I'm just cleaning up that edge a little bit. I'm taking out some of my sketchy lines, but I like the looseness of it, so I don't want to lose everything. But just took out those ones on the bottom. You'll see me, I pinch in and out a lot to see what it looks like, bigger, smaller. Okay, I feel like it needs more texture, so I'm using the Artist Crayon, which is one of Procreate's brushes. It's one that I really like for texture, and I'm just trying to make it look like the texture on the feathers, because owls have such great camouflage because of the way that their feathers look. So I want to make sure that I capture that a little bit. Even though it's not photorealistic, I still want it to look like a barred owl. And I see it in the belly a little bit too. And I'm just going over some areas in the face to add some highlights, going over the Artist Crayon a little bit, just to bring around the eyes a little more forward. Now I'm going to start to add more details, so I'm going to use my waxy pencil to just kind of bring out the texture in the feathers a little more, how the feathers look like they're laying on top of each other. And now it's time for the eyes. And I know I need a darker color and a smaller brush. One cool thing about Procreate is if you make a circle and then you stop, it makes it almost a perfect circle. You just take your Apple Pencil and you make a circle and then you stop, and then it makes that circle for you. It's really cool. Try it. So now I just want to add a little more depth to the owl eyes, because one thing about their eyes is that they just look huge because of the shadow, how they're kind of sunken in. And this is another Max Ulichney brush that I'm using. It's the Gouache, translucent gouache brush, and I use that a lot, and I layer it, and I keep going until I get the effect that I want. So here I'm just layering the gouache brush. No. Let's see what else we can do. That's what it's all about. So now we're trying the waxy pencil just to see if we can add a little more texture and depth with the waxy pencil. I think I like that better. Beak. Coming together now. I feel like we need something more in the background. Make something a little bit lighter maybe. Especially since we have the yellow in the beak and the feet, so I feel like we need to pull a little bit of yellow in the leaves as well. Now let's see if we can make the beak stand out a little more. I'm going to use my waxy pencil and just add a little bit of shadow underneath the beak. And some shadows on the feathers. Let's see. So that bar on the left, if you're not familiar, you probably already know this, but the top one, that makes the brush larger and smaller. So that's what I've been doing over there. And then the bottom, that lowers the opacity and brings the opacity up. So anytime you need to do that, that's right there. It makes it pretty easy. Right, and now I'm doing the same thing, created a clipping mask, but on the branch this time. So we can add some light and shadow to the branch only. And I feel like our owl needs some other colors in it to make it stand out a little more, so I'm just going to play with that a little bit. I took that sienna color, trying to add it in, see where it might look good. We'll make make it stand out from the green leaves a little more. Just playing around with the color. Just experimenting a little bit. I feel like it needs a brighter burnt sienna color in the plumage to bring out the beautiful colors in the owl's feathers a little more in it, so it stands out from the background. So right now I'm using Max's Gouache Flow brush that's a little bit translucent, and I'm just going over the layer that had that darker brown tone and just adding a little bit of a translucent wash of the Gouache Flow brush on top of that. Okay, it's coming together. I think I might add a few more details to the background leaves. And finally, I just look at where I need a little more contrast, a little more shadows. Add any last few details that you think you might need. Alright, you can hide the palette, and I think we are about finished, so thank you for watching. I hope you learned a little bit, and I can't wait to see what you make.